Index www.reddit.com web link. The beginning of what? She held out her long arm and motioned with her fingers. Come closer and we will show you. I was confident that what followed would be me getting devoured like that body she'd been chewing on earlier, that horrific sound of teeth breaking through bone. All I could do was hope I was wrong. I stepped forward. She grinned. Yes, that's it. Closer. It was now apparent just how tall this abomination really was. She towered over me. My head wasn't even to her waist. She leaned down and put her face inches from mine. I could smell the metallic odor of the blood from her previous meal. Her eyes were large white saucers. Witness us, she said, and all the candles went out simultaneously, plunging the cavern into complete darkness. Now, what comes next might be hard to believe. Or maybe it won't be considering all I'd already gone through. I was not told a story by this thing, but rather given memories. Knowledge of the past. This is what I learned. In Scandinavia many centuries ago, there were people who practiced witchcraft, both men and women. At first, they were celebrated for their ability to heal others. It didn't take long, though, for these witches and warlocks to develop a taste for more sinister practices. Evil had permeated their souls, and at night, they became entities known as the mare. Their souls would take on a hideous physical form, and they'd wander from person to person, giving them nightmares, hence the name. Sometimes the nightmares were so awful, people actually died from them. Before long, the Scandinavian people started accusing the witches and warlocks, and rightfully so. But unbeknownst to them, the mare had supporters. These were people who embraced the darkness and whose loyalty to the mare was rewarded through special healing and such. One night, with the assistance of their supporters, the mare snuck onto a boat and sailed away from Scandinavia, never to return. Meanwhile, the followers stayed behind, hoping to convert more followers and one day reunite with the mare. Years went by, and the mare loyalists remained small in number. They married amongst each other, and following the Norman conquest, settled in what eventually became known as Mundyville, Normandy. Several generations passed, and the belief in the mare began to fade. But one family remained persistent in their faith. This family eventually moved to England and adopted the surname Mundy. In 1587, the Mundys sailed from England to North Carolina and joined the now infamous Roanoke colony. Hundreds of years prior, the mare had landed in Canada and traveled south along the eastern coastline before they too settled in the Carolinas. But Scandinavia was not the only place in the world in which folktale rang true. There was something more terrifying lurking in the wilds of North America, the Wendigo. This was a creature the natives feared immensely. It was a large, human-like monstrosity that feasted on people. But it also had an evil air about it, and that energy was a virus to those who were around it too long. It would drive them people to commit horrible sins, greed, cannibalism, murder. The Wendigo had a lifespan far longer than that of the mare, or at least the actual human part of the mare. Evil attracts evil, I reckon, and as a result, the two found each other. And merged. The mare possessed the Wendigo, making the beast more nightmarish than it already was. The evil qualities of both remained alive in this one creature. The Mundys were still strong believers in the mare, but practiced their worship in secrecy. There was no question in their minds that the mare existed, they'd always seen the extra shadows following their own. And in North Carolina, they were reunited. The colonists were asleep when the mare arrived in their Wendigo skin, creeping through the night, and bringing an extra chill to the air. The Mundys felt the presence of their masters and woke before everyone else. For the others, it was intense nightmares that shook them out of bed. One fellow had gotten so terrified, he nearly wet himself. He quickly stumbled outside to relieve his bladder, and while doing so, saw the Mundys knelt down by the woods, staring towards the trees. They looked as if they were praising the woods itself, then all of a sudden a tree moved. But it wasn't a tree. As the colonist's eyes adjusted, he could see coming out of the woods the 15-foot Wendigo, with her gangly limbs and saucer eyes. He tried to warn the others, but it was ultimately useless. The Roanoke colonists were taken to the mountain, leaving behind the mystery of the lost colony that still stumps historians even today. I imagine the folks studying it ain't ever considered that ungodly scenario. The past up to that point was now ingrained in my memory, but there was more, the plans for the future. To cast the world into the chaos of the Wendigo and create an eternal nightmare. They're in the mountains. Not just here in Appalachia, but across the entire world. And it's in this mountain that it begins. This is where the mare create more mare. They're out there already, living amongst y'all, convincing the morally corrupt to follow them. And when the time comes, they will go to the mountains, where the Wendigo await with insatiable hunger. When I snapped back to reality, I could see that the Wendigo was hunched over again, eating another meal. I carefully crept out of the lair and back out the way I came in. Sarah was waiting for me, her face showing that same emotionless expression. "Now you know," she said. "Why am I still alive?" "You're protected." "That ain't what my dad says." "He's not protected." "Then why the hell am I?" Sarah's face changed, the first sign of emotion I'd seen on her yet. She was smirking. "You're a Mundy." Index www.reddit.com web link. I felt like a failure much of my adult life. Nearly 30 years old and still living at home. I don't hold jobs long, and when I'm in them, they don't pay anything a lone man can survive on anyways. If you want your own property up here, you best be married, and seeing as to how I ain't had a relationship that lasted, that's been out of the question for me. But I see now that I've been blessed. Had I accomplished my dream of independence from my parents, I would have had to done something truly awful to keep it alive. So, I ain't gonna whine about being a failure anymore. I'd gone into town yesterday morning to buy some supplies. This is a small town, and if you go through enough of them, you'll find that they don't always have a police force. But we do. It ain't anything substantial. Just a handful of good old boys wearing badges. As I was loading up and getting back in my truck, I noticed Chief Collins approaching me. "How you doing, son?" he asked. I figured it was best he didn't see what I just purchased, so I closed the door and stood outside the truck with him. "Not bad, sir," I said. "Good. All quiet up on the mountain?" Now, Chief Collins ain't living at home with his parents like me. He's married with kids, and has a decent-sized house. He's definitely given kids to the Mundys, and based off his prominent position in the community, I'm gonna guess he gave them 3. "Actually," I began, "not really." "Oh? Heard quite the fuss coming from the Keller house last night." "The Kellers ain't too close to your place. You heard them from all the way up there?" "Well, them boys were mighty loud. And you know how noise carries out here." "Which boys you talking about?" "The Keller boys. The children." Chief Collins pinched his mustache and gave a shit-eating grin. "The Kellers don't have any children." It was obvious this fucker was lying, as I knew for a fact he coached them boys in baseball. So, I played along. "You sure? Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else." "Positive. The Kellers ain't ever had any kids. At least not yet." He laughed. I shrugged. "Well, alright then. I better head back home. Good seeing ya." Chief Collins waved as I pulled away, and in the mirror I watched as his smile promptly faded. Dad was waiting for me at home. All our guns were laid across the kitchen table, 2 Remington 870 shotguns, 2 Ruger hunting rifles, and several different pistols and revolvers. "You get the stuff?" he asked. I set several bags containing ammunition, flares, batteries, zip ties, and more, beside the table. Told the fella working the counter that all the recent UFO news had gotten us worried. Dad chuckled. "You think he believed you?" He agreed that they were cause for concern. Dad loaded another pistol. "Your mother called. Said she made it there safe." "She see it?" He nodded. "We'd told her to head out of town and stay at a church for the night. The idea being that if this supernatural force truly is connected to the devil, she'd be safe in a church that isn't controlled by the Mundys. We knew it was a slim chance. She don't want it to deter us, though," Dad said as he loaded another pistol. I stepped over to the table to help load the remaining guns and Dad placed a hand on my shoulder. "Son," he said, 30 years ago, your mother and I did something we're deeply ashamed of to keep you with us. I don't want to lose you, but if I do, at least it's while doing what is right." Dad slapped the magazine into the pistol and chambered the round. And you damn sure won't be going down alone. Or without a fight. Dad placed the last pistol on the table with all the other guns, knives, and tactical gear. There's gonna be a fight? I laughed and gave him a hug. Told him I loved him. We were going to be entering hell after midnight, and I couldn't think of a better man to do it with. We'd heard it was going to rain through the night and prayed that the Mundys weren't the type to wait out the storm. We were banking on them heading down the mountain at 1 a.m., otherwise we'd have to wait another day. And we didn't know if we had that kind of time. Luckily, the rain wasn't overly heavy. Enough to get you wet without feeling like you're swimming. We watched from the window as the Mundys walked past the house. Once they were out of sight, we exited the house armed like a damn backwoods SEAL team. We each carried a shotgun and a rifle, with pistols attached to our waists and extras in our backpacks. We both wore headlamps, which we kept off until reaching the Mundy house. Once on the property, we weaved around the ever-growing collection of junk and made it to the front entrance, which was still unlocked. We stepped into the creaking old hallway, the odor of rotting meat just as pungent as before. Water from the strengthening storm dripped from the various cracks in the walls and ceiling. The buzzing of the flies grew louder as we traveled further down the hall. Then, without warning, the rear door at the end of the hall crashed open. A male Mundy charged through without pause. My dad, who had insisted on taking lead out of what he felt was his parental duty, managed to fire off a single shot from his Remington 870 as he was knocked to the floor. I took aim and fired, but I'd also been hit. From behind. My shot went high and into the ceiling. The gun fell from my hands. The second I collided with the ground, I began to be dragged by my ankles back the way we came in. I clawed at the floor, trying not to lose sight of my dad. He was fighting from his back. The Mundy he was struggling with appeared to be bleeding from the shoulder, not that it made any difference. I watched as the Mundy tossed my dad's shotgun and dragged him by his beard over to the padlocked door. Dad drew his pistol from his waist as I was pulled outside into the mud. Several shots rang out from inside, but not a full clip. The Mundy had stopped him. I pulled my own pistol, and quickly rolled over to fire. Immediately my wrists were pinned to the ground above my head. My attacker was mounted on top of me. I was now face to face with a Mundy. He leaned in close. The smell of rancid meat was present as he breathed on me. He seemed to be enjoying it, like a baby playing with a toy, and with a toothless smile to match. "Keep holding him, Bubba," a familiar voice said from nearby. Suddenly, a flashlight shined in my eyes and I felt someone take my pistol. Then they proceeded to frisk me, and remove the rest of my weapons. "Boy, you done it now," said Chief Collins, as he angled the light away from my eyes. "Let me go." Chief Collins laughed. "What you think, Sarah?" The old lady stepped into sight. Her long, thin hair wet against her old, witchy face. She got real close to me, leaned over and said, "They're expecting you."